So, Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us today and leading the conversation around compensation and negotiation for investment professionals. So, we had a number of people from across the private equity and venture capital industry discussing that topic with us. What would you say were some of the top points that came out of the discussion?
So I felt the top points, at least from my perspective, around compensation and how to have the conversations. So I think for everyone in the room, it's key for them to be armed with information. We talked about where to get that information from recruiters, from comp surveys, from peers, from networks, just to understand actually what different compensation levels are. And then the other piece of information that's critical is understanding the process at your own firm, asking the questions, knowing which parts of comp are variable, which parts can you impact through performance, what are the metrics to get to the next level, et cetera. And then the approach. So thinking long-term as well as short-term, thinking, longer term compensation, also your journey at the firm.
So do you mean like carried interest?
Carried interest,
the performance bonus. Yeah.
Long-term incentives that are in place typically for more senior people. So thinking about how your comp might change over time, what the whole picture looks like over time. Obviously, there are short-term issues that should be addressed as well if you have questions or concerns. But trying to think of the whole package and also the whole journey, like what that looks like longer term. Also making sure you ask questions and you have these conversations ongoing in a sort of collaborative way, bringing concerns and questions and data to the table, but in a way that isn't, threatening, I'm leaving tomorrow.
Yes.
That kind of thing. So not just doing it in December or January or whenever you get paid your bonus or your comp might change, having those conversations over time so you know where you stand and also what the future looks like for your compensation.
Yes. What have you seen in terms of really trusted sources of data? And when you've had someone, say, come to you and talk about examples that they've got, what has impressed you and convinced you and what hasn't?
Okay. So trusted sources of data for me are different comp surveys that are used by companies. They're not usually given out to individuals, but firms use a couple of different comp surveys to kind of figure out where their people stand. So that's a trusted source for me, taken with a grain of salt, because you have to understand exactly what titles are matching up and what levels. But when individuals come and they understand more than the title of the person, the data point, they understand the role, and it's an equivalent role, and more than one data point.
Yes.
Because everybody can find one person with the same title who's being paid more, and there isn't a lot of information about their situation.
Yeah. That's right. I always say try and get 3 data points, and the 3 most relevant. So fund size, experience of the person, but also contribution of the person, because comp is so linked to deals and the fund performance, and what have you actually contributed, and how can you make your case based off your contribution, not just off, well, it's an associate at X fund.
Exactly.
Paid.
So relevant is key. Is it a similar firm, similar fund size? Are you playing a similar role? You may have the same title, but you might be playing a wildly different role. Someone else might be leading deals, and you might be supporting on deals, and focusing a lot on your own contribution. Yeah, I think that's quite important, because people have to understand, the firm is investing in them and how are they performing.
Yes, yeah. And it sounds like you're also saying the approach and how you're doing the communication. So really like respecting the relationship as well that you have, whether it's with HR or with the manager. Is there anyone else that's critical around that negotiation point to build relationship with?
I mentioned to the group that I think it's quite helpful to have a recruiter that you know and trust, like maybe a few, because they have real-time information and they can also translate for you. So maybe you have a couple of data points, this person knows those funds can say, well, this role is similar, but that role is less relevant, or there are these other factors in play. So I think recruiters can be quite helpful.
Yeah.
You should have those relationships ongoing. If you have a mentor, an informal mentor somewhere, maybe in a different firm, but someone who's more senior than you are, who kind of knows the ecosystem.
Yeah. They can also be a really good person to practice with.
Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely.
Because you mentioned that in terms of practice some of these discussions and negotiations to know how you're coming across and maybe which areas you can push more on or where you can push less on.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then there are also networks that can be quite helpful. So there are different groups of similar-minded people in the same industry, and that's quite helpful in a number of ways, not just in compensation negotiation.
Yeah. And maybe even to think about setting up your own network that is most relevant. If you can't find it, then set it up. It only needs to be 4 or 5 of you that are willing to share information and help each other. And I've seen people do that really, really successfully over Slack or WhatsApp.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to leave the audience with, or any final considerations?
Gosh, I don't know. I think it's just information is key.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, ask.
Yeah.
And have a level of trust with your firm that maybe the information wasn't readily out there, but they're happy to tell you or tell you why they can't tell you specifics. So, it's good to keep those relationships going, ask the questions, find out what you can, and, have a certain level of trust in the organization.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
It was a good discussion.
Good.